This is Saving America with your host, Dr. David D. Schein, author, professor, attorney, and all-around useful person, presenting the intersection of business and politics. Enjoy common sense commentary and interviews with some of the world's most interesting people. Now here's your host, Dr. David D. Schein.
Thanks, John, for getting our show launched today. We're kicking off this edition of Saving America with my week in review commentary. As gasoline prices continue to be front page news and Russia and Ukraine even called a 3-day truce, what else is going on? Job market numbers seem to run contrary to headlines. American injustice on steroids. Foreclosures surge as housing costs outpace Americans' finances. Let's take a closer look at these and other hot stories for week 20 of 2026, followed by my interesting guest this week, Ilya Shapiro, who will be talking about the decline of elite universities, followed by Shelley Castle, who has a great entrepreneur story. Now, job market numbers seem to run contrary to headlines. I have two hiring numbers for April, 115,000 and 109,000, of course, from two different sources. Either way, this is not a bad number for new hires, not at all. Note that March reportedly had even stronger hiring at 185,000. That is such a rosy number. I'm not sure it's accurate, especially in light of the April number. So we're kind of playing roulette with these numbers coming out. The unemployment rate stayed at 4.3%. As I've cautioned in previous episodes, I'm not a big fan of the unemployment number since people out of work for a long time actually drop out of this statistic. Many people with good work experience and solid educations are telling me they've been looking for work for more than 6 months. So we are definitely facing mixed signals, as I'm sure a lot of my audience out there faces similar circumstances. We often find people in our lives that are unemployed, and yet these unemployment numbers seem to stay positive. The big winner in hiring is healthcare, driven by our aging population, which creates a constant stream of demand for caretakers and those with health field-related experience. Some other reasons for the good hiring numbers include Trump starting the penalty cost of $100,000 to hire foreign H-1B visa holders and the surge in deportations and self-deportations. The story on those foreign H-1Bs is that the background on that is to allow people who are not citizens of the United States to take certain jobs if they have skills that are not readily available in the United States. The problem with the program has been enforcement, not the program itself, but it is alleged that a lot of these people are simply being brought in because they're cheap labor, which hurts American workers. So the program does need to be policed better. I don't know that we need this big penalty cost up front, but we'll see. Many of our boomers are trying to stay in the job market due to the high cost of living and children staying at home longer due to inflation, making it more difficult for those entering the job market to get that first house. Job turnover is low. Those who have jobs are clinging to them, while a handful of companies like Meta have announced mega layoffs. Most employers are taking a moderate approach to reducing their workforces. Another interesting suggestion is that consumers are spending more due to the Trump tax cuts, and so retail hiring is good. This makes some sense since consumers were out of money, so retail sales were starting to decline before these tax refunds started to come in. So the consumers are back out there spending some money, best I can tell. Thanks for listening to this episode of Saving America, and we want to remind you that I do have 2 books out. Decline of America is my first book, where I talk about the American presidency during the American Empire from Wilson through Obama, and we will be coming out in the future with a sequel which will include chapters on Biden and Trump, of course. American Injustice on Steroids. So, more disturbing headlines that should make every hardworking American do double takes. I was in my car when I heard a magistrate in D.C. committed an unforgivable act when he apologized to a person caught in the act of trying to assassinate the president and members of his cabinet. I was screaming out loud in my car in anger. A magistrate is an employee of the court system who hears motions and generally supports the judges of the various courts. The D.C. federal judges are notoriously made up of the whack left. The judges are appointed for life, so they have to be impeached, not fired. Those whack judges appointed this magistrate. Since magistrates are employees, I call for discipline for this loser clown up to and including firing. His name is Zia M. Faroukhi, who holds 2 degrees from Georgetown, previously regarded as an elite university. Obviously, not so much today. We'll hear more about that with my first guest shortly. The accused assassin was held in a 5-point restraint, which is normal for critical prisoners. This seems reasonable considering the seriousness of the crimes he committed and attempted to commit. He had also been held on suicide watch for several days prior to his hearing. So this clown magistrate is quoted as saying, "Whatever you've been through, I apologize for the prior week." Incredibly, Faroukhi compared the detention circumstances to the incredible injustice done to the majority of the J6 protesters. There is simply no comparison between the crimes of this person relative to the protesters. He shot a federal officer, fortunately in his bulletproof vest. Otherwise, that officer would be dead. How can you apologize to this person? I will not mention the name of the piece of trash who is accused of shooting a federal officer and trying to rush into the Washington correspondents' dinner with weapons in hand. There's no need to give him any fame, as that might have been his deranged objective all along. How about this from the AG of Minnesota, Keith Ellison? He has presided over the incredible level of fraud in Minnesota along with his buddy Tampon Timmy. He has reached a no prison time deal with a fraudster who's accused of, get this, stealing $11 million of our tax dollars in a long-running Medicaid fraud scheme. Part of this sweetheart deal from Ellison is that the convict gives back $2.2 million. What about the other $9 million? Supposedly, the deal will include him helping to bring down the alleged mastermind who is believed to have fled to the country of Kenya. Yeah, that guy was accused of millions in fraud, and a judge gave him bond despite the prosecution asking them not to do so. So now he's in another country, and I doubt there will ever be a recovery or bringing this guy back. And to tie a ribbon on this week of injustice, then there's the story of an alleged murderer here in Houston, Texas. He's accused of murdering his pregnant wife. Yep, some whack judge let him get off on bond and an ankle monitor. So he cut off the monitor and fled to Italy with a fake passport. Italy realized the passport was fake, so they arrested him. That's the good news. But now they may refuse extradition back to the USA due to the possibility that this poor baby might get the death penalty for murdering his pregnant wife. So, another mess created by our broken justice system. I'll report on these and other whack judges every week if I have to, as this has to stop now. We Americans deserve judges who will respect the rights of victims, not kiss up to criminals. Since federal judges have to be impeached, I call for taxpayers to start putting the spotlight on such judges and demanding impeachments. For state court judges, start reviewing their records and voting against soft-on-crime judges. Time for justice to serve the victims and our society. Foreclosures surge as housing costs outpace Americans' finances. Foreclosures jumped 26% in the first quarter of 2026. This is shades of the financial hardships people experienced during the COVID pandemic. However, a big piece of this is taxes and insurance. I can speak personally about this. I have a modest triplex here in Houston. Between the taxes and insurance, I'm paying in excess of $30,000 a year. That's right. Each of those 3 units has to pay $10,000 a year in just those 2 items before my mortgage and property upkeep. Forget about a net rental margin. The saving grace for me is that I do have a low interest rate on my mortgage. The foreclosures are hitting the more recent home buyers who may be paying more than double my current interest rate. Also concerning are the costs of everything else. People are getting hit with HOA fees and condo fees. A friend of mine just got hit with a $13,000 assessment from her condo association for repairs to the building. This is on top of her monthly fee, which is already greater than her mortgage payment. So, time to cut taxes, not raise them. Time for the public sector to tighten their belts and help out the taxpayers. To reduce insurance, check out the unnecessarily high costs of rebuilding caused by local, out-of-control planning commissions. The LA fire recovery is a vivid example. Not one house has been built since the tragic fires in Los Angeles. Dell Computers relocates its corporate headquarters to Texas. This is a big win for Texas, folks. Another big company has pulled its incorporation status out of Delaware. I was surprised Dell Computers was even based in Delaware, since their business operations are located in Texas near Austin. This follows a stream of other high-profile corporations fleeing Delaware after its famed corporation court turned woke. As I say here on Saving America, go woke, go broke. Another high-profile move from Delaware to Texas, of course, was by Elon Musk, moving his corporate operations to the Lone Star State. In fact, about 60 public corporations have left Delaware over the last few years, representing $3 trillion in valuation. And as someone who gets asked about corporate formation from time to time, I no longer recommend Delaware, even for promising future public companies. ExxonMobil just moved its headquarters from New Jersey to Texas, underscoring how far Delaware has fallen. Elections in the UK bring positive change. We Americans sometimes do not notice critical changes outside of our own backyards. However, some local elections in the UK have major implications for the future of world civilization. As I've expressed in a recent episode, I was urging a boycott of all of the UK due to concerning trends of a seeming takeover of its whole society by radical Islamists. Well, as I'd hoped, the average UK citizen has come alive in time to vote overwhelmingly in local elections. The current leader, Starmer, and his Labour Party have led this descent into chaos and destruction of its historic civilization. The Reform Party and the Green Party just dealt the Labour Party its worst one-election defeat ever. And this is good news for civilization. Hopefully, this will spread throughout the UK and then into the rest of Europe. I'm not quite ready to suspend my boycott, but this is a major step to UK returning to my approved travel list. Time to reform SNAP, big time. SNAP stands for the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. The idea is to reduce food insecurity for struggling low-income Americans. It has been plagued with fraud. A recent headline, I actually heard part of the speech, by VP J.D. Vance is that 186,000 dead people were just removed from SNAP. He joked that the media will accuse him of taking SNAP benefits away. He said he can deal with taking food away from dead people. Well, I'm glad to hear that. Here in Texas, Representative Keith Self is still trying to ban soda pop and other sugary drinks from SNAP benefits. This is a move that I unequivocally support. The reason this is floating around is that a bipartisan vote blocked his efforts to ban such drinks from SNAP benefits. This sadly included 55 GOP members in the House. My assumption is that many of these politicians get donations from the big soft drink companies, so they voted in their favor and not the taxpayers and the health of Americans. This is sickening that $9 billion each year of SNAP benefits go to this trash. That is 10% of the total budget for SNAP overall. I again urge all such social welfare programs to be deleted from the federal level. Fire all the employees at the federal level and make the states both administer and fund such programs. I guarantee they will be much better guardians of these fraud-ridden giveaways. We taxpayers will absolutely gain some ground for a change. Big hack hits academia at finals time. As a college professor, I was using both Blackboard and Canvas this semester. I was indeed fortunate that the hack on Canvas happened after I closed out my class in that course management system that's also known as a CMS. And my final in that course was not via Canvas. The parent company for Canvas is called Infrastructure, and it was the victim of a cyber attack that shiny hunters claimed to have caused. This is an extortion operation that has done similar attacks in the past. I know a couple local colleges that were impacted right in the middle of finals. On the positive side, the hack was reportedly corrected fairly quickly, which is unusual. However, I'm not sure of the outcome of the data breach itself, which may have claimed the names, emails, and student ID numbers of the schools that were hacked. I anticipate there's a lot more to come on this. It takes money to make money. Well, at least that's what I've learned from my decades in business. What prompted my thinking on this subject is the huge cost of building modern data centers to provide the computing power for AI and other new developments in technology. A tech darling until recently is Oracle. The question is whether banks will be willing to finance Oracle to the tune of $300 billion to expand and develop these power-hungry and expensive data centers. The rush to build out such centers reminds me of the lead up to the famous dot-com boom and the crash in the year 2000. And the flip side of the data centers is that they are true energy hogs. It won't do much good to build data centers that do not have the energy to power them. The numbers are staggering. The build-out could be more than $3 trillion, of which Oracle and its competitors are expected to only be able to generate half of that amount of their own money. The rest will have to be borrowed, obviously, and that could be corporate bonds, new equity offerings, and bank loans. The other big players seem to have stronger hand raising money as opposed to Oracle. So we shall see how this shakes out, and we'll probably hear fairly soon. The CCP needs to learn its place in the world. With Trump's visit to China, a visit that I oppose, Xi appears to be even with Trump on the world stage. The reality is far from it. The impact of the Iran shutdown on China is massive. I do not like it when Trump talks like Xi and his band of gangsters are friends with the USA. This is actually used against Trump and the GOP by the left, and of course the media. On the other hand, Trump is a famous negotiator, so let's see how this all sorts out. In the meantime, the CCP flexes its muscle as often as possible. Recently, Xi complained because the USA, Philippines, and Japan engaged in coordinated military drills, including live fire exercises in the Philippines near the South China Sea. He seemed to be especially concerned with the growing involvement of Japan in these important military exercises. This is good, as I want Xi and the CCP to understand that the USA is a power around the world. We will not yield any part of the world to these failed commies. And in our special interest report this week, this one's a bit gross, but it really caught my attention. A report from the South African Police Service announced that they had recovered human remains from a crocodile in the Komati River. The suspected victim was a hotel owner who was apparently swept into the river during a flood about a week earlier. Hopefully, he drowned before being eaten by the croc. I did some more reading on the location, and this river runs next to the huge Kruger National Park on the eastern side of South Africa. A few years ago, I stayed at a safari camp near Kruger and did travel through parts of the Kruger National Park. While I was concerned about the wildlife like lions and leopards, I did not actually think about a possible risk from crocodiles. Have to admit that. Recovery in this case was the big story as the authorities lowered a police officer, wouldn't have been me, by helicopter into an island in the river. The suspected croc was over 15 feet long, weighed about 1,100 pounds, and had already been killed. The cop was lowered beside the dead croc, and he hooked it up to the helicopter, and it was removed for examination. They will match the DNA of the human remains they found inside to hopefully determine it was the hotel owner. A strange footnote to the story is that 6 pairs of shoes were also found in the croc's stomach. And that's my Week in Review report for week 20 of 2026, featured on the Brushwood Media Network. If you enjoyed the show so far, please like, comment, and subscribe on YouTube at Dr. Dave Saves America. I appreciate your support. Now, stay tuned for our first guest. Our series of interviews for Saving America establishes that the world is full of interesting people. Once you hear from our next guest, I'm sure that you will agree that he deserves the moniker of interesting person. Saving America welcomes Ilya Shapiro, who is a senior fellow and director of constitutional studies at the Manhattan Institute and a contributing editor of City Journal. Previously, he was an executive director and senior lecturer at Georgetown Center for Constitution, and before that, vice president of the Cato Institute. Shapiro is the author of Lawless, The Miseducation of America's Elite, and Supreme Disorder, Judicial Nominations and the Politics of America's Highest Court. And he's the co-author of Religious Liberties for Corporations. He's been published in many leading publications and writes the Shapiro's Gavel newsletter on Substack. Shapiro has testified many times before Congress and state legislatures and has filed more than 500 friend of the court briefs in the Supreme Court. He's got a bachelor's from Princeton, a master's from the London School of Economics, and a law degree from the University of Chicago. He is joining us to discuss the decline of some of America's most famous universities. So let's go out and consciously get along with our neighbors. Let's reduce the violence and discord in our wonderful country. Saving America welcomes Ilya Shapiro for his first appearance on Saving America.
Well, great to be with you, David. Thanks for having me. And yes, I try to be friendly to courts and lots of other people besides.
Sounds like a winner. Well, we encourage here on Saving America people to be friendly to each other, and it's one of my platforms in life is to get people to talk to each other and cooperate with each other. And you've delved into an area that's been a great interest. We both did our bachelor's degree at Ivy League schools. They're only about 40 miles apart. And I was there, I think, a bit earlier than you were. But at the time, I could see these schools heading into this, what we currently call, just for simple terms, the woke decline that seems to be taking over a lot of America's higher education institutes, at least the fancy ones. So what's the current status of many of the leading law schools in the United States in terms of understanding constitutional structure and protections? Does this situation include the reaction at Georgetown Law School to one of your tweets?
Yeah, well, David, I'm going to start by pushing back on a little of your framing, because I don't think that what you saw when you were a student or a young alum or in the decades since is really what I'm getting at, in the sense that we've had a long time, more than half a century, of kind of liberal faculty bias and other such things. But what we have now in the last 10, 12 years is the illiberal takeover of higher education. Now, there are illiberal things that happen in society from lots of ideological directions, but in higher education, which is captured by the left, that is left-wing illiberalism. And that means an intolerance to opposing views and opposition to the basic classical liberal values of higher education, free speech, academic freedom, equal protection of the laws. All of these things are anathema to a postmodern theory that holds that power imbalances are baked into structures and institutions, and so all of those structures and institutions need to be torn down and rebuilt or reconfigured according to a different privilege hierarchy or intersectional matrix, all of that kind of philosophical mumbo jumbo. And that's particularly dangerous in law schools because, after all, they graduate the next generation of the gatekeepers of our legal and political institutions. Much as it's sad if a sociology or an English department goes off the rails, the consequences for society are much more dire with law schools or medical schools, where there also are these dangerous trends, where that's literally an issue of life and death. And I trace that illiberal takeover, again, something that's much more recent and different than kind of the decades-long conservative complaint about the hippies taking over the faculty lounge. Indeed, those hippies, the Berkeley free speech movement, would now be considered retrograde white supremacists by today's radicals. And they've been aided and abetted by university leaders. And so there have been failures of ideology, which everybody likes to talk about, critical legal studies, critical theory, etc. We can get into that. But even more importantly, failures of bureaucracy and failures of leadership. And a lot of this, it's not, doesn't put in for sound bites as much, but understanding these undercurrents, these structural changes that have happened is very important for understanding the direction, the crisis in higher education, and my focus on legal education.
Well, it is a major challenge, and yes, I agree with you that it was a different type of wokeness that I experienced. I saw that slide starting, but I don't know that any of us anticipated that it would get as bad as it has gotten. And for the law schools, how did they get to this point? I mean, it's almost anti-law to see some of the approaches they're taking today.
Right. So, law schools have had a left-wing bias for a while. I mean, for a long time, in classes of constitutional law, there wouldn't even be the Constitution in the case books. And then it kind of made it into an appendix and eventually started to make its way where students would actually read it. That harkens to a broader revolution in the law with originalism and textualism and Justice Scalia and all of these other developments. But law schools, the problem is, to be a good lawyer, you have to understand every perspective on a given issue to represent your client's interests, whether it be in the courtroom, in the boardroom, at the negotiating table, wherever lawyers appear. You have to see what the other side's perspective might be to be able to better counter it. Well, if half or more of those perspectives are considered anathema, that you're not allowed, they're outside the Overton window, the permissible range of expressed policy views, you're not going to be a very good lawyer. If half the federal judiciary is going to be appointed by Republicans, and that is increasingly or entirely originalist at this point, to not have faculty on your at your school that can teach originalism, forget actually believing in it, but being able to convey it as a mode of interpretation and advocacy for your students. If you don't have that, and most schools don't, then you're doing your students a disservice just in terms of their being able to advocate in the courts. And so you've had this vicious cycle. Part of this is generational with millennials that are more activist replacing the baby boomer generation that are kind of more traditional ACLU type liberals. And you see this shift from education to activism or indoctrination. And as I mentioned, the bureaucracy, there's just been an explosion of non-teaching staff that are even more biased and aren't steeped in norms of academic freedom or the search for the truth or what have you, to the point where, especially in elite places, there are many times more bureaucrats, non-teaching staff than professors, and even multiples of the number of students at places like Stanford or Yale. So the joke is, 100 years ago, Yaleys came to campus with their own personal butler, and maybe now we're trying to provide that same level of service with these educational bureaucrats. And it's not just the DEI offices, I should add, David. We can get into DEI, but admissions offices, student services, the importation of behavioral psychology, the safetyism, the idea of harm, an idea that is uncomfortable to you, that might offend you or you've never encountered before, makes you uncomfortable and therefore can't be taught. These importation of these theories from other disciplines has really harmed legal education.
Yeah, and of course, I think the public is starting to pay attention when they see some of these law graduates who've become judges who are releasing hardened criminals with probation after somebody's killed somebody, and we're sitting back here saying this guy's on the street, or this guy got 5 years instead of life in prison. So I think it's starting to catch the public's attention in some different areas, particularly with regard to, I think, the what's happening in criminal law. How do we fix this problem? How do we get back to having great American law schools? And I think we're seeing a reaction in the judiciary, because I've heard that the federal judiciary up in your neighborhood up in New York and Washington have said they will not hire current Yale Law School graduates. I don't know how broadly that rule is, but it caught my attention, since Yale historically had been ranked one of the top law schools in the country. And I've heard that have been unseated from that position in the latest polls.
Well, I mean, the U.S. News rankings don't mean that much if it's just a matter of, one or two spots here and there. You got to
Yeah.
take that with a grain of salt. But yeah, Yale, along with Stanford, have long been thought of as among the very, very best, most prestigious at least. And over a dozen judges are boycotting those two schools in particular for clerkship hiring because of their unhealthy climate or attitude or policy with respect to the freedom of speech. Another 20 or so judges are boycotting Columbia because of anti-Semitism and related issues. So, yeah, that's one of the tools in the tool chest. In my book, Lawless, I write about, at the end, what can be done, what should be done to counter this. Some institutions might not be salvageable and they'll decline. The whether you're thinking about the rankings or kind of the prestige or the reputations of schools, they're not static over time. They can change. But in general, it'll take external actors, exogenous shocks, as some economists would put it, and that includes action by state legislatures in the case of public schools. Investigations, hearings by the federal government. We've seen hearings of university presidents in the House Education Committee that have been very effective, for example. And now the executive branch, the Justice Department Civil Rights Section, the Department of Education, that are investigating and levying fines and putting into receivership certain schools and programs. All of that is to the good, and employers deciding that we're just not going to hire people who yell at federal judges, "We hope your daughters are raped," or who support Hamas or other terrorist organizations. So, I think it'll. I'm for all of the above in terms of trying alternative solutions, whether with respect to higher education broadly or legal education specifically.
Well, you've hit an acronym, and I actually talk about it in some of my classes, is DEI. And of course, Trump personally has come out heavily against it and tried to get the Department of Education to defund schools that still practice that. And I know here in Texas and our closest competing state over in Florida have both the governors of both states have said that their official policy is that state universities in those two states cannot have DEI. And of course, we've seen different academics trying to work around that and create different misnomers for their DEI approach. But why was DEI so bad in the first place? What did it do to our educational system and especially our law schools?
Yeah, I go into this, well, in my book, but also I have an article in Sapir, S-A-P-I-R, which is a journal of Jewish ideas, I guess they call themselves. I have an article called The Diversity Industrial Complex. And I explain how the words diversity, equity, inclusion, the concepts, their dictionary definitions, there's nothing wrong with them. In fact, they're healthy. You want to have a diversity of ideas that prevents groupthink. It makes for richer discussions, better decision making. Equity in the legal context is a centuries-old Anglo-American legal concept that simply means treating people fairly, very understandable, equitably. Inclusion, you want people to feel comfortable and welcome where they're working or studying or what have you. Obviously, good, uncontroversial things. The problem is, as practiced by the professionals, by DEI officers, and there are so many of them that there's actually an industry group called the National Association of Higher Education Diversity Officers, tens of thousands of people. The way that it's practiced is in quite literally an Orwellian sense, the opposite of what I've just defined. So it goes against diversity of thought. It opposes equality of opportunity in favor of equality of result, and it excludes anybody who might have an opposing view. And so, as practiced and as developed, this DEI theory is about people all thinking the same way in a very radical, progressive way. Some people call it woke or whatever. But the point is, I was alluding to these postmodern theories of power imbalances that are reflected in institutions, which then need to be torn down and reconfigured, that you have to check your privilege, as it were, and where your rights and freedoms depend on which groups you're part of and whether they're deemed an oppressor or oppressed, all of these sorts of things that are not healthy, especially in the realm of higher education, where you're supposed to be searching for truth, creating knowledge, conveying knowledge to the next generation, regardless of where that might lead. It goes against intellectual freedom. And so as these DEI systems have been put in place, it prevents certain kind of pedagogy, prevents certain kind of teaching. It affects who's admitted, and the admissions office looks for activists rather than people who might want to become a prosecutor or work on antitrust to create lower prices for consumers, or other reasons that people might go to law school for. And it really changes the nature, not just of law schools, but eventually of the legal profession.
Well, it is an interesting pathway, and like I said, in my first book, one of the conclusions I draw is that one of the reasons America is so great is due to the diversity of our population, and I'm unequivocally an advocate of true diversity, where we bring all sorts of people together and we give all of them an opportunity to express what they think and how they came to it, and it's created this incredible outcome here for the United States. And it's kind of interesting that people who are practicing this DEI stuff have lost track of where this how we got to the success that we have. It's interesting. I have 2 degrees from the University of Virginia, which is not one of the Ivies, but is one of the most highly ranked public schools. And it's interesting because I was so offended about, I'm a college professor here in Houston at a little Catholic college. At the University of Virginia, they were paying their DEI director, this is around 2020, 2021, over $400,000 a year. And Jim Ryan was the president. And it's kind of interesting because I have been contacted by a group called the Jefferson Group. And they clearly were a little unhappy with the direction that UVA was going in and began to organize the alumni to say, hey, this is not Jeffersonian thought. This is really off track. And it's interesting as I think the DEI person is gone, but it was interesting because Jim Ryan about 6 months ago resigned 1 year ahead of his planned retirement. And he alluded to what was going on in terms of the alumni coming back up at him and saying, you're taking this wonderful, highly ranked university in the wrong direction. So it's kind of interesting because he was in for about 10 years. So I'm hoping we're going to see some of that in some of these other institutions.
And you know, an inordinate number of these DEI offices and officers were formed in the last decade. And that's when things have really exploded. Now, things might be different now because of President Trump's executive orders and the enforcement by the Justice Department and others, although in some places they've taken down websites and changed titles, but nothing's really changed. And so it'll take a while and continued foot on the gas to counteract it. But as of 2021, a survey of 65 large universities, the old Power Five football conferences, now it's all reconfigured, but anyway, representing about 16% of students at four-year schools in the country, found that the average college had more than 45 people devoted to DEI, more than the average number of history professors. At Michigan, 261 people had full-time authority over DEI, double that if you include part-time responsibilities, at a cost of more than $30 million a year. Now think about, spending that money if you care about helping people from underprivileged backgrounds, say on tutoring, on scholarships, who knows what. But instead, it was the fastest growing segment of the educational bureaucracy, with staffs on average 4 times larger than those that provide legally required accommodations to students with disabilities. And this is the irony or the bitter, the sardony, you could say, of all of this. These offices fail on their own terms. Campus climate surveys show that student satisfaction generally, comfort with diversity specifically, inversely correlates with the size and budgets of DEI offices. So this has just been just a terrible development for academia and for American society.
Well, I'm certainly hoping that that's going to change, and I hope people will see your book and take some lessons from that. And as you know, we keep these interviews short so people actually listen to them and benefit from what you're sharing with them. How can our audience get more information about you and your book, Lawless: The Miseducation of America's Elite?
Well, sure. You can read all about me and keep up with my writings and amicus briefs and all the rest at my page at the Manhattan Institute, which is just manhattan.institute. You can follow me on X, formerly Twitter, at iShapiro. And on Substack, as you mentioned, David, I have a newsletter, Shapiro's Gavel. And then you can buy my books, whether at Amazon or any other place where fine and not so fine books are sold.
Sounds like a winner. It's been great visiting with you. This is Dr. David D. Schein for Saving America. Thanks for joining us, and be sure to like, comment, and subscribe on YouTube at Dr. Dave Saves America. I want to thank all my fans for watching our shows or participating in our shows or listening to our shows. It all makes a difference. And I wanted to especially visit on this particular day because we shot past our objective. We were shooting to have 1,000 people enrolled on our Facebook page, and we shot past that. And it's very exciting for me. And I wanted to back up just a little bit and share my story as to why this is so important to me. Saving America is not just a name of a show. It's my commitment to our country. And it's my commitment to every loyal American out there who wants to see this country continue to be number one in freedom and love of country across the world. And I just thought it's important to share that with you. I've always been a conservative. Yes, even from a little kid, came from a military family, so that's not unexpected. But I never had this question period that we see so many people in high school and college go through this thing where they're not so happy with the United States. I've never had that impression. And it's been something that I've always been committed to making the best of myself and to being a contribution to my country. And part of that objective was to get a higher education. I'm a first-generation college student. My parents did not attend college. My dad attended a little bit of college later. But it was something about being somebody, bringing some value to the country. And in my many careers, I've come to the point where I'm giving back by being a professor and also by sponsoring and producing Business Law 101 and Saving America. And so one of the things that I did, how I got started in this, is I've always been interested in talking, big surprise. I was a debate star in high school. And then in college, I ended up on radio. I was actually on public radio in Philadelphia. And then went through a long period where it just focused on education and my corporate life and my business life. Later got a chance to be on radio again in Richmond, Virginia with a show called It's Your Job to talk about the employment area, which is my professional area of interest. And then I went through some real changes by becoming a professor. I began to understand writing and doing research, and I produced my first book, Decline of America. And it's a positive book. It says we have become a great country despite who's been in the White House, because we frankly haven't had the best people in the White House. But what we have done is we've had the best American people putting this country together, winning 2 world wars, winning the space race, winning the Cold War. And it's been very exciting. But I want people to understand how important it is that we get control of our government, which has been out of control, largely spun out of control by FDR during the Great Depression. He used the Great Depression to basically abuse the concept of limited government. And we've had, unfortunately, a lot of politicians who've participated in keeping the bureaucracy running, and that's both parties. And I produced my second book, Bad Deal for America, and it's a nonpartisan book. It's 26 Republicans and 26 Democrats who are saying some of the dumbest things you've ever heard. And yes, these people are on our payroll, and we need to do the best with it. So please continue to watch, continue to listen, and we appreciate the support from every one of you. Welcome to Saving America. This is your host, Dr. David D. Schein. Our series of interviews for Saving America establishes that the world is full of interesting people. Once you hear from our next guest, I'm sure you'll agree that she deserves the moniker of interesting person. Saving America welcomes Shelley Castle.
Hi, y'all. I'm Shelley Castle.
And you are the founder and CEO of Impeccable Rideshare LLC, a premier luxury transportation company serving Houston, Texas, and the surrounding area. Her company has won numerous awards over the last few years. Getting started, however, wasn't easy. Prior to starting her company in 2022, she drove for Uber and Lyft for 5 years. She has a fascinating personal story, which she shared in her book, Spread the Word on Making It Happen, which was published in 2024. We welcome Shelley Castle for her first appearance on Saving America.
Hi, y'all. I'm Shelley Castle. I'm known as Miss Impeccable on social media. This is my book, Spread the Word on Making It Happen. I'm a woman-owned business. I found my business in January of 2022. And the reason I found my business is because I lost all three jobs during COVID. I was at bottom's with my life. I didn't want to be here. I felt like I wasn't loved. I wasn't needed, that, I was just done. And I told God just to just take me out of this world. I'm through with this evil world. Just take me to heaven. I'm ready to go. And finally, I just commanded God. I told him, please take me right now. I'm commanding you to take me, or you give me a passion and purpose and reason to go on and reason to thrive and reason to live. Well, God gave me my company. He told me to do it, to take that, not just a leap of faith, but to literally run and jump off the great cliff into the great unknown, falling without a life jacket, y'all. Had no one to save me. The only thing that saved me was Jesus. He stopped me in my tracks. He stopped me from hitting the ground flat, landing on my face and dying. He said, I am not letting you die. You are going to do it and you're going to win. And I didn't know it was going to be inspiring, but I sure did. I mean, just like I said, I didn't have a life jacket, nothing to save me, but Jesus, he stopped me in my tracks and he's brought me up ever since. Yes, it's a roller coaster, entrepreneurship, and it is hard getting a business going. And especially in the safety and transportation industry, getting people to realize about safety and what we have to offer. But I became a dynamic author, won numerous awards, been in numerous magazines, became an inspirational speaker now. I spoke at January 29th at Texas Southern University at the School of Entrepreneurship with Tracy Seals and the School of Entrepreneurship. And they loved my story. They loved my grit, my resilience, my inspiration. And the second time I spoke was this Friday, March 13th, at an elementary school in Fort Bend ISD, just telling kids about safety, how rideshare isn't safe, and definitely to get a limousine service, safe ride with us, and telling them
Okay,
about
and Shelley,
entrepreneurship.
I want to back you up just a little bit. Tell us a little bit about your early life, because the shutdown in COVID wasn't your first hard time in life, right? What happened earlier?
Right. Well, definitely, early life, I've had some obstacles. I was born and raised dirt poor poverty, single motherhood. I was a middle child, so I had like that middle child syndrome. I did have a disability. Me and my older sister, we were both born with epilepsy. I outgrew it, but I had a learning disability. My older sister, she passed away and she got all the attention because she had a disability. My younger sister, she got spoiled and I was just left out to dry. I didn't feel loved. I didn't feel needed. I resented my parents. I turned against my parents. I just had a lot of battles that I battled with, and it's all in my book. It's all in my story. And then, of course, your family dynamics, being raised poor in Houston, not being in a family where you had that example to get out of that situation. No money, bad credit my parents had, really poor credit. We lived in rundown house, barely had food on the table. When we did have a meal, you made sure you finished the plate. Um, I was the first one in my family to become an entrepreneur, first one to become an author, and now the first one to become an inspirational speaker. So I'm very, very proud of myself, even through this crazy, wildest journey. Um, but
I
that's,
hear you on that.
that's where I've
And
been.
Shelley, I wanted to talk a little bit about why the transportation industry, because there's a lot of different industries and businesses out there. How did you happen to pick transportation?
Well, I picked up Uber and Lyft as a third job, and I found it fun. I was a nighttime driver. I picked it up as a third job. I quit my second job when I seen that you could make good money back then. It was in 2017, April of 2017, when I started Uber and Lyft. Um, I just seen that I love to talk to people. At first, it's like, you're getting behind the wheel, you're putting strangers in your car, you're scared. I was scared and nervous at first. But a friend on Facebook was like, Shelly, come work, do Uber. You'll make more money in one ride than you would in your whole second shift, working $10 an hour, fast food, making, $40 after taxes in a whole shift. And you can make that 40, $50 in one ride going to the airport back then. Now you'll be lucky to make $10 going to the airport. I mean, it's really, really bad because it's oversaturated and the market is high. But that was the story of my company. You know, they cut it off, and I didn't want to be here no more. You know, just like I said, I lost all 3 jobs, even Uber and Lyft, had 5-star rating. It's always about fun, always about safety, always about impeccable service and that unforgettable experience.
Well,
But that's
it's
how I
an
got started.
interesting trip. Tell us how you would advise others who are struggling today. What advice, what have you learned that you want to share with others who maybe are struggling like you were?
Well, definitely that no matter what you go through, never give up. That's what I'll tell people. Never give up through the deepest struggles. I mean, I've had moments where still at my lowest, and I have days where I'm at my highest and I'm getting all these awards. But once you give up, you fail, you lose. You can't win if you give up. You can only win if you hang in there, you push through the deepest struggle, the hardest times. But no matter what you're facing, they always say the sky's the limit, the stars are the limit. That's not true. I went to go see Grant Cardone. He's a big multi-billionaire in real estate, and I seen him in Hollywood, Florida in April of 2024. And it's not true. The only limit is you. That's the only thing that's limiting you, no matter what you're battling with, what your financial dynamics, your family dynamics, your friends. Get rid of anything that's negative in your life. That's what I've been telling kids and speaking at schools. If anyone is negative, if they say that you're ugly, if they don't like you, you don't need them in your circle if they don't support you. If they are not a positive influence, your circle, your worth is your net worth. Yeah, your net worth is your net worth. And that's true. Your network is who you're going to be.
Well, it sounds like a fascinating story, and it'll be interesting to see what those future chapters look like. And how can our audience get more information about you, your book, and your company?
You can definitely find me on LinkedIn, and my website is impeccablerideshare.com. It has an About Me page with my book on there. It has a lot of the awards that I've won. You can find me on Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, you name it, I'm out there. You can always call me at 832-269-3796 if you need any guidance or support. I'm always willing to help someone out, and then I can always learn and grow from you as well.
Sounds like a winner. This is Dr. David D. Schein for Saving America. Thanks for joining us, and be sure to like, comment, and subscribe on our YouTube at Dr. Dave Saves America, and you'll also find some extra content there. We appreciate every one of you listening to our show and joining us either on video or on audio, or both, of course. And you can join us on the Brushwood Media Network on Saturdays, now airing twice on Saturdays. And you can also find us on YouTube at Dr. Dave Saves America.
Thanks for joining us today for Saving America with your host, Dr. David D. Schein. You can find the doctor at drdavesavesamerica.com and on social media. We'll see you next time on Saving America with Dr. David D. Schein.